What do you make of this? Why the hell were Harry and Meghan awarded a Humanitarian award? What have they done to earn this?
Good evening, Ben. What have they done to earn it? They've done absolutely nothing. Grifters Harry and Meghan have just been crowned Humanitarian of the Year, a title so laughable.
There are moments in modern media when a truth so radiant appears that it scorches every shadow it touches. The announcement that Prince Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, were to receive a Humanitarian of the Year award was one of those moments. It was not simply a trophy, not a glittering ornament for a mantle in Montecito. It was a declaration that their work, their empathy, their consistency, their refusal to trade integrity for applause, had been seen, weighed, and found worthy on a global scale. And yet, predictably, the spectacle of decency provoked a storm among those who have built careers out of sneering at it. GB News, the self-styled voice of the people, erupted into a familiar chorus of resentment. Commentator Lees Cohen, who has carved an entire niche out of belittling the Sussexes, spat his disbelief on air. The Sussexes have done absolutely nothing. What charlatans to accept this award, philanthropic poison. It was a performance that belonged to an earlier century. A man trembling at the sight of progress, using outrage as oxygen. Viewers could see what it was, envy dressed as analysis, and desperation mistaken for commentary. The irony, of course, is that every syllable meant to wound Harry and Meghan only reminded the public why they matter. Prince Harry has worn many uniforms, soldier, son, founder, father, but none fit him more naturally than the mantle of humanitarian. From the dust of Afghanistan to the Invictus arenas filled with wounded veterans, his life has been a study in empathy that works. Meghan, too, has transformed compassion into motion. Whether it is a kitchen feeding survivors of the Grenfell Tower fire or the quiet funding of shelters and women's initiatives, her philanthropy is not a press release. It is a pulse. Their Humanitarian award, then, was never about pomp. It was recognition of continuity, a through line from action to effect. The world sees that. The people who don't are those whose business model depends on blindness. GB News has built its brand on indignation. Every broadcast is an audition for grievance. Every segment, an echo of yesterday's anger. When the Sussexes thrive, GB News gasps. When Harry and Meghan receive a humanitarian honour, it is not news to them. It is an existential threat. For them, Meghan's elegance and intellect are intolerable. Harry's courage and independence are infuriating. Their success outside the palace walls dismantles the illusion that the monarchy defines worth. GB News depends on that illusion for clicks and relevance. Without the Sussexes to demonise, the network's outrage economy would collapse. So, when Lees Cohen called them philanthropic poison, what he was really confessing was fear. The fear that his words, his set, his soundbites are losing grip in a world that has moved beyond bitterness. It always begins the same way. A clip of Harry speaking about mental health becomes whining. Meghan attending a charity event becomes self-promotion. The pair holding hands becomes a PR stunt. GB News packages these fragments, wraps them in sarcasm, and sells them as analysis. But viewers are not fools. They know a smear when they see one. The network's decision to recycle old footage of Meghan and Harry, sometimes years old, while presenting it as current commentary, exposes the bankruptcy of its coverage. Their archives are their oxygen tanks. Without them, they would suffocate in silence. By contrast, the Sussexes keep moving forward. Each initiative, each partnership, each scholarship under the Archewell Foundation expands the circle of lives touched. That is why awards follow them, not because they chase them, but because their work leaves a visible trail of uplift. When Harry and Meghan walked away from royal life, they didn't walk into comfort. They walked into scrutiny. They chose autonomy over privilege, purpose over pageantry. They built their own structure, financed their own team, and designed projects that gave others visibility. In a world obsessed with hierarchy, That independence unsettles those who prefer subjects to citizens. GB News exists in that unease. It cannot comprehend that two people born or married into royalty might use that influence to dismantle barriers instead of reinforcing them. Thus, every humanitarian act must be twisted into vanity. Every recognition must be mocked as deceit. It's the only way the critics can keep their audience's anger alive. When Cohen sneered that Harry and Meghan have done absolutely nothing, the world laughed, not at the Sussexes but at him. For nothing is the word that describes GB News's own humanitarian record. No shelters built, no scholarships funded, no relief sent to disaster zones. Just words, hours of talk, noise and resentment. Harry and Meghan's critics could have joined the movement they pretend to scorn. They could have raised awareness for the same causes, matched donations, inspired empathy. Instead, they mocked from a distance, clutching microphones like torches in a cave of their own making. Their outrage revealed a mirror, and what stared back was irrelevance. Harry and Meghan's authenticity is their armor. When they speak of mental health, it is not a fashionable talking point, it is lived experience. When they champion veterans, it is not ceremonial, it is personal. This is why humanitarian circles outside the tabloid bubble see them as legitimate leaders. Their work has measurable outcomes: therapy programs expanded, community kitchens funded, girls educated, refugees supported. These are not fantasies. They are audited projects, backed by transparent figures. GB News, on the other hand, offers only the theatre of anger. Their studio lights glare brighter than their facts. They scream hypocrisy, but never present evidence. They brand compassion as narcissism, but never lift a finger to serve anyone but their advertisers. In the early years after Megxit, outrage sold. Every sneer drew ratings. But now the formula falters. The public has begun to tune out the echo chamber. Even former critics admit, reluctantly, that Harry and Meghan have outgrown the noise. Their Netflix documentaries raised awareness. Their business ventures fund employment. Their speeches inspire policy discussions. So, what does a network do when its chosen villains become validated heroes? It shouts louder. Lees Cohen's tirade was not journalism. It was panic. His words slashed at the air, searching for traction in a climate that has moved on. And each insult, each recycled insult, only expanded the gap between the Sussexes' global reputation and GB News's dwindling relevance. There is a reason Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, inspires such hysteria among reactionary pundits. She embodies a truth they cannot suppress, that empathy and intellect can coexist with glamour, that a woman of colour can redefine royalty without permission. Her mere existence dismantles the class scaffolding GB News defends. That is why every achievement of hers is treated like an affront. When she wins an award, they call it a PR stunt. When she stays silent, they call it arrogance. Yet through all that noise, she remains calm, measured, and purpose-driven. To the millions of women watching around the world, Meghan's dignity is the award that never needs engraving. She represents the triumph of authenticity over approval. Prince Harry's humanitarian arc did not begin with cameras. It began in the field, in uniform, with mud on his boots and the memory of loss in his eyes. The same man who walked behind his mother's coffin as a boy now walks beside veterans and children who find hope in his presence. To call such a man a charlatan is to reveal one's own moral poverty. GB News cannot rewrite the record. Harry's work through Invictus, Centrebale, and Archewell is documented and quantifiable. Lives have been changed, not through rhetoric, but through funding, policy partnerships, and visibility. That is what humanitarianism looks like when stripped of ceremony. It is steady, unspectacular, and relentless, everything the outrage merchants are not. There comes a point when light itself becomes offensive to those who live by shadow. Every award the Sussexes receive, every crowd that cheers them, feels like an indictment of the cynics who mocked them. Lees Cohen and GB News are not merely critical, they are allergic. The humanitarian recognition for Harry and Meghan forced them to confront a possibility too painful to admit: that the couple they dismissed as exiles have become icons. So they lash out, like moths burning their own wings on the bulb they curse. The more they attack, the more they prove their dependence on the very people they despise. The global reaction told the real story. Social media platforms flooded with congratulations for the Sussexes, while clips of Cohen's rant trended for all the wrong reasons. Commenters mocked the absurdity of calling philanthropists poison. Journalists from independent outlets wrote op-eds dissecting GB News's meltdown as proof of moral bankruptcy. It wasn't a contest of opinion, it was a referendum on credibility, and the Sussexes won without saying a word. Their silence was dignity. Their dignity was power. And power, when anchored in compassion, does not need to shout back. The true measure of a humanitarian is legacy, not applause. Harry and Meghan's projects have already outlived their scandals. Archewell's partnerships continue across continents: scholarships for girls in Afghanistan, disaster relief in Maui, mental health initiatives for youth. Meanwhile, GB News's legacy is a catalogue of clips, anger preserved in pixels, destined for irrelevance as soon as the algorithm shifts. Years from now, researchers will cite Harry and Meghan's foundation as a model of modern philanthropy. They will cite GB News as an example of how media outrage tried and failed to drown progress. Even as GB News foamed with indignation, the Sussexes were already moving on to their next project. That is their rhythm: work, not words. Their humanitarian award ceremony was modest, their speeches brief, their gratitude sincere. No grandstanding, no rebuttals, just grace. And in that grace lay their ultimate victory. They didn't need to argue with the pundits, their work had already silenced them. Because the truth of service does not require defense. It stands, unshaken, when the shouting fades. If GB News had any introspection left, they might study this moment. They might realize that journalism is not a competition of cruelty, that criticism without comprehension corrodes credibility. They might understand that to belittle those who serve is to confess one's own emptiness, but they won't. The outrage machine cannot pause long enough to reflect. It must keep spinning, even as its gears grind down to dust. In the end, history will not remember the headlines of outrage. It will remember the hands that helped. Prince Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, will be recorded as humanitarians who turned trauma into purpose, scrutiny into service, exile into influence. GB News and Lees Cohen will be footnotes in that story, the noisy resistance to compassion, the last defenders of a crumbling cynicism. Their insults will echo briefly, then vanish beneath the applause of those whose lives were changed by the work they mocked. Because love, sincerity, and service are undefeated, and no amount of televised bitterness can erase what Harry and Meghan have built.
Wow, wow, wow. Wow, that was a great submission. And to all our peculiar and amazing Sussex family, thank you all for working with us in this juncture, for supporting Harry and Meghan. And do not forget to subscribe, like, and put a comment. Bye bye. See you in our next episode.